are these people?
Let's just talk about, and this is Reef's favorite kind of story, corporate greed. All right. By Mr. Business himself, Matt Stoller. Not always the greatest fan of Matt, but when it comes to monopoly, he's one of the best there is, to knowing what's happening with big business. And he caught this one on corruption, right? Spirit Airlines. I don't know if you've heard, but Spirit declared bankruptcy. We're going to talk about that here. But Spirit Airlines CEO got a $3.8 million bonus a week before they declare bankruptcy. I know they don't claw that back. They just keep it. Just, here you go. All right. There's a backlash against antitrust enforcement because enforcers blocked the JetBlue Spirit merger. But this one's on the executives who paid themselves lavishly a week before declaring bankruptcy. Like they didn't know the company was insolvent. That's wow. So, and this is a short one from Matt, but he says that in January of 2024, a judge blocked the attempted merger of Spirit and JetBlue, which was the right move, by the way. The airline industry is an oligopoly that has become more concentrated due to a series of mergers in the first decades of the 21st century, with a small group of firms in control of the vast majority of the market. Seems pretty accurate and reasonable. He was correct in his assessment, but at the time of the decision, Matt made the point that a re-regulation of airline travel was essential if we're to end a cycle of bankruptcies and consolidation. You can't just hope competition will win out. In an unregulated industry, the result will be malinvestment, bankruptcies, consolidation, and then mass bailouts. Why? Because the government has no choice. They want to keep the planes in the air. They're going to end up bailing out the industry if they need help. Right? So 11 months later, of course, naturally, Spirit declares bankruptcy, negotiating a deal with its creditors to reduce its debt, wipe out its shareholders, and continue flying as an independent airline. So no penalty to, like, the airline for mismanagement, and that's what he's going to talk about here. All tickets are being honored. It's still a going concern. So there's no actual change to the air travel system, right? But a lot of observers have used this example to show why antitrust enforcement is bad. Yes. The Wall Street Journal, for instance, wrote an editorial making this point directly. Okay, well, if the Wall Street Journal is saying it, I don't know if I agree with it, but, too bad the government won't compensate the workers, the flyers, and the creditors harmed by its blunder. It's not up to the government to do that. Sorry, it's up to the industry to do that in theory. I mean, but, it's up to the government to make sure that they don't tank a company. Sure. He said that argument isn't correct, and I'm going to explain why. But let's start with something that you won't hear from most of the people making the argument about how antitrust drove the bankruptcy, which isn't the case. Like he says here, the CEO of Spirit, Ted Christie, a man who presided over the insolvency of the firm, was paid a $3.8 million retention bonus the week before the bankruptcy filing. The reason such a fact matters isn't just because it's outrageous, it's because it's one more bad decision by a bad management team blaming the government for their own bad choices. Right? So he says, let's start at the beginning. Prior to COVID, you had four big trunk airlines, American, Delta, Southwest, and United. They focused on business travel, while the ultra low cost segment of carriers, which includes Spirit with their $9 fares that then got jacked up with every fee if you wanted to not wait in line, and if you wanted to bring a carry-on bag and you wanted to stow your shit up top and check a bag, it all ended up costing more money. All right, but they targeted price-sensitive leisure travelers, literally people who would go with a backpack. After COVID, demand for air travel shifted from business to leisure as businesses replaced in-person conferences with Zoom. So the big four began going after leisure travel. Sure, that happened, right? The Big Four have significant competitive advantages. They control a disproportionate share of airport infrastructure. They can cross-subsidize money losing routes, right? They have more flights and erect barriers to entry through loyalty programs, and they can hire away pilots during a staff shortage. So when they started competing, it put pressure on the low-cost airlines, naturally. Like it says, one result is that Frontier in 2022, Frontier sought to merge with Spirit to create a significant ultra-low-cost network that could match some of the advantages of the Big Four. Only at that point, JetBlue, which had already engaged in a quasi-merger with American through a joint program called their Northeast Alliance, made a hostile bid for Spirit. So you had Frontier and Spirit were trying to merge. And now here comes JetBlue trying to buy them. They proposed on overlapping routes where they competed to rip out seats and hike prices, which is a classic indication of a strategy to lessen competition, not to provide additional service, for sure. It's to save their companies from going bankrupt and from going under and competing with the Big Four airlines. So he says, Spirit's board hired a consultant to evaluate the deal, who then told executives and shareholders that JetBlue offer would likely violate the antitrust offer, the laws, except that here's what happened. The CEO publicly recommended against the JetBlue bid, saying that the latest offer does nothing to address our board's serious concerns that a combination of that with them wouldn't receive regulatory approval. Right? The board even presented this legal analysis to shareholders. Here's one of the slides. So why the hell did they still go forward with a JetBlue merger and not a Frontier merger? All right. They were going to raise Spirit's ticket prices. This was already in discussions. A JetBlue acquisition will have lasting negative impacts on consumers. So why would Spirit do it? This is why. Because what ensued was a bidding war between JetBlue and Frontier over Spirit. JetBlue raised their bid, and ultimately shareholders and executives accepted the higher JetBlue offer. It was about the money, Blabowski. What else is new? Right? The result was exactly what the Spirit board had predicted. The antitrust division sued last year to block it, and the law is the law. But that's not all, of course. This year, during the trial over JetBlue's proposed acquisition, the judge directly asked Spirit executives if they would go bankrupt should the merger fail. The reason why is because there's a special loophole in merger law, such that if your firm would otherwise fail absent the merger, you can get a special dispensation to sell your company if such a sale would erode competition. And that makes sense. If the company goes out of business, then there wouldn't be competition anyway. So what did Spirit executives tell the judge? They said, no, we're not a failing firm. We'll be fine if the merger doesn't happen. And so here's the judge's order saying that they presented no evidence that Spirit was in dire financial situation, that it had no hope for the future, and instead they testified that they had a plan to return to profitability, which they didn't, obviously.
No, testify!
Right? In other words, they turned down the Frontier merger and accepted JetBlue's proposed illegal one to get more money. Like I said, the money, Lebowski. Then the executives misled the court or themselves on the firm's financial condition, so they wouldn't have to admit that they had run the airline into the ground. After then paying themselves a sweetheart deal on the way out. So that's the situation. Okay, my parents went away on a week's vacation. No, they went away on a permanent vacation here. All right. But an additional question is as follows. Is the bankruptcy actually bad? Sure, shareholders will get wiped out. Guess what? Good. They deserve it. Thanks, Matt. Capitalism. They opted for an illegal deal instead of a legal one. That wasn't the shareholders, though. That was the board that I guess the shareholders appointed. But you can't, like some guy that owns 100 shares of Spirit that's going to go down to zero. It ain't his fucking fault, Matt. Plus, Spirit will keep flying as a competitive airline, at least for now. And How are they going to pay their pilots? Where's the money coming from? This particular kind of bankruptcy isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means you reorganize the creditor relationships, but keep the entity going as a going concern. No, not exactly. Because you don't just wipe out the creditors, you wipe out the unions and your employees. You have to hire everyone back, probably at a lower wage. He doesn't mention any of this because capitalism, you know? So here's this article that he's referencing, but financial failure in the airline industry is exceedingly common and has been since the 70s. American, Delta, United, Northwest, US Air, and they all went through it because it's a function of deregulation, as he noted. And I don't want to go through what he talked about then, but basically financial fragility is the problem. About 5 years ago, Southwest entered the Hawaiian market, and it did so by vastly undercutting pricing. What else is new? Such that it was almost certainly losing money to drive Hawaiian out of business. They wanted to go after Hawaiian Airlines, all right? Because Alaska bought Hawaiian, so Southwest wanted to compete. They tried to drop their prices. There really was no choice but to let the two firms combine or have Hawaiian go under. Hawaiian is now cutting jobs after its merger, showing that mergers are not panaceas for poorly run or financially fragile companies. It just prolongs the death. And the executives make handsome cash in the meantime, which is the reason why they're prolonging all of this. They're just extracting wealth slowly, sucking out the pension funds, cutting the unions, cutting the pensions, cutting the benefits, cutting the wages, slowing all that shit. It's so upsetting. And most media just doesn't want to address any of this, including Matt Stoller. He touches on it. And it's nice that he starts to touch on it, but he's even missing how badly they're going to fuck the workers and the people who really get hurt by this. All right? This financial attack happened to Hawaiian, but the ability of large players to undercut ultra-low carriers, right, low-cost carriers with money-losing strategies, cross-subsidized by higher tickets elsewhere, has a whole host of similar airlines, including Spirit, right? It's hit everyone. So they have to charge more for like a Pittsburgh-Detroit route in order to be able to lose money so they can have an LA-Honolulu route. That is what is being said here, all right? Only instead of doing a legal combination or being honest about their financial fragility, Spirit executives and shareholders demanded that enforcers let them violate the law. In other words, and this is the reason why I brought it, was this paragraph, the real reason for blaming this bankruptcy on antitrust enforcement is because it's too embarrassing to point to the real problems, which are poor management, lax predatory pricing law, and ultimately deregulation. Like, we need to nationalize the airline industry, likely, to make it nonprofit. Oh my God, the libertarians just lost their mind in the chat. Sorry, that's true. Mm-hmm. Like, subsidizing and losing industry that claims it's for profit, where we have to socialize the losses, but they privatize any of the gains. Fuck that. Like he says, but again, just remember the CEO's multi-million-dollar pay. This guy drove Spirit into bankruptcy, got a big bonus, then blamed the enforcers for upholding the law. Nice work if you can get it.
Stop! You violated the law.
Fuck, man. So that's big by Matt Stoller. He's got thousands of paid subscribers. I can't get 10. Can I get 10 paid subscribers and Matt Stoller to pop over to us here? Come on, man. He's a decent writer. He's decent. Sometimes. When he's not shit-libby.
Until he writes dumb nonsense.
When he's China fear-mongering. He does
January
that too.
6ing or...
Yeah. He goes on breaking points. He goes on breaking points. Yep. He ain't the greatest, but He's one of the better business writers in the space that considers themselves to be lefties. I would call him a mid-lib.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Talking about stuff like that definitely is why we will never be remonetized. My guess is on YouTube. So if you do appreciate the reporting and journalism like this and stories like this, let us keep the lights on, keep doing this. Please join that wall of fame if you haven't already. All these awesome people already have. Easiest way to do that is Cash App. If you've got that, $ Indie News Network, INDIE. All right, Ko-fi.com, PayPal, Patreon. There's also INNnewsletter.com you see going across the scroll. All right, there you can support that with a monthly